Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. Before we get into the stories, I wanted to give a trigger warning for story number 1 for sexual assault. And remember, if you have your own scary story that you would like to share with the channel, you can submit that at southerncannibal.com. Well, if you're all ready, let's get into the stories. And remember, as always, stay hungry. For starters, let me open this by positioning a trigger warning for the story I'm about to relay. The following recounts heavy subject matters such as child-on-child sexual assault, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Please tread lightly. My name is Zim. I'm a 19-year-old trans man, and I'm bipolar and autistic. The story is one that has deeply traumatized me, but I've made the steps necessary in the past few months to start getting the help that I need. Keep in mind, this is a heavily condensed version of these events. Anyways, the story starts at the ripe age of 12 years old in the 7th grade, with a friend introducing me to a friend of theirs. Let's call this person G. She was a grade younger than me, despite us being the same age, and we began to grow super close. We did everything together, and it felt really nice to be at the center of someone's attention. It consisted of the type of things you would expect for the first few months, goofy preteen shit, but there was always this underlying easiness that I felt around her. She was very touchy and controlling over me, in a way that I desperately tried to brush off as being her love language. She didn't seem to give much a shit about anyone else in our friend group, and often acted cold and bitter towards them whenever they would try to talk to me, even the friend that introduced me to her. By the time 8th grade rolled around, she started asking very strange favors of me. We were both autistic, and very much into fandom culture and role-playing, and pretty much anything I was into at the time she would fixate on as well. The strange request started at the lunch table, with a hand caressing and squeezing my thigh, followed by her asking to role-play. I was always very hesitant to do so, but she always found a way to coerce me into it. As you can expect, these roleplays weren't roleplays at all, but in fact a ploy to straight up molest me. She would force herself on me, touching my chest, kissing my neck, and sitting on my lap. All of this done in a middle school cafeteria. This happened frequently, and always ended with her playing it off like everything was normal and okay, or blaming it on her autism, something that deeply upset me. I became used to it though. I started to tolerate the abuse because I liked the attention she was giving me. I didn't want to lose her, but I didn't like when she was angry either. Cut to around a month or two after the abuse began. G was turning 13 years old, and she was having a slumber party / pool party at a hotel. We all met at her house before taking a car there. I of course sat next to her, a hand on my thigh the whole time. Eventually we arrived and we had checked into the hotel room to settle down a bit before heading to the pool. After a while, everyone decided to start getting into their bathing suits, and all was normal, until G asked me to come with her into one of the rooms. She shut the door behind her and smirked, asking me if I wanted to come change with her in the bathroom. I reluctantly agreed, visibly uncomfortable. She was my best friend after all, and my child brain thought it would be funny, not grasping the severity of what was happening. We both shuffled into the bathroom, with our bathing suits in hand, my heart palpitating. I faced away from her, hit with a sudden wave of uneasiness. I pulled my suit up, paying careful mind to fix the creases, and spun around, only to be met with her fully exposed body. A smile still plastered on her face. "What are you doing?" I asked, completely bewildered. "What? I thought it would be funny," she said, before laughing. I shuffled out of the bathroom, my heart pounding out of my chest. I sat on the bed outside, waiting for her to come out, all the while trying and failing to process what had just happened to me. Eventually she came out and asked if I was ready to head to the pool, acting as if nothing was wrong. We made our way down with the others, my mind swirling with thoughts. The rest of the sleepover was a blur. My brain, not yet mature enough to unpack what had just happened to me, began to act recklessly, running down hallways, banging on doors, and singing at the top of my lungs most of the night. I remember getting scolded for it and not caring in the slightest. Nothing was real that night. Eventually it was time to go home, and the sleepover from hell was over. But this was all just the beginning. That Monday, I came into lunch and sat down, smiling at G, who was already seated. She smirked and placed a hand on my hand. "Can I tell you something?" she slurred. Sure. What's up?" I asked. She bit her lip, as if contemplating what she was about to say, and what she said next shook me to my core. "I want to have sex with you." I recoiled, staring at her. "What?" "I really like you," she said. I like you too," I said, completely and utterly confused. She then proceeded to explain to me in explicit detail on what she wanted to do to me and how she would do it, essentially describing rape. I wasn't in a good place during this time. I was confused and scared, never really knowing what she was going to do or say next. I began to grow confused over my own feelings. Maybe I liked her too. After all, I did like the attention she was giving me, but the touching and whispers never felt good. The verbal and sexual abuse persisted, with her getting bolder each time it happened. She would say and do things to keep me in line, like saying that her mother didn't like me and that we couldn't hang outside of school because of what I did at her party. All of this was done to make me feel bad. She would break me down and make it seem like I was the bad guy in the relationship, and that it was my fault that she was touching me. She would constantly call me and grow furious if I dared to hang up. She would say things about my body, things no 13-year-old should ever be hearing from another 13-year-old. I desperately wanted out. In June of that year, my friend group started planning a trip to the drive-in theater for one of our friends who was moving in a month. It seemed like a fun idea, and I was super excited. Ice Age Collision Course and that shitty Ghostbusters remake were playing, and it was a fun night for the most part. G was laying next to me in the dark. I made it clear that I needed space, and she seemed to listen at first. I kept my eyes fixed on the movie as I felt her arms and legs coil around me, her breath tickling my neck. I can never forget that part. The way it sent shivers down my spine. How completely and utterly terrified I felt in that moment. She pushed herself onto me, as if trying to crawl on top of me, and I pushed her away. I couldn't exactly tell what her face looked like in the dark, but I could tell she was mad. "What's your problem?" she growled. I said nothing and walked away to join my friends in the trunk. I remember quietly crying in the car ride home. After that night, I started planning my escape. Like I stated earlier, we were a grade apart and I had just graduated 8th grade. I actually met someone in the same year as me about a month earlier, who I shared a mutual fixation with. We'll call this person N. Me and N grew close pretty quickly due to our shared interests, and she was nothing but kind to me. It really helped me realize just how bad of a situation I was in. Soon enough, 9th grade rolled around, and I decided I was going to ghost G after she invited me to her 14th birthday party. She picked up on this very quickly and angrily questioned me on it. I ended up sending her a long winding response about how awful of a human being she was and how I never wanted to speak to her again. She responded by calling me multiple times, threatening to come to my house and hurt me, and leaving infuriated voicemails where she called me things such as whore and slut. I blocked her number and I deleted all of her messages in a fit of rage, something I deeply regret doing now. I was a child that didn't understand the concept of receipts. Despite all of my hatred towards her, I remember feeling guilty after it all. Abusers have a tendency to make you feel that way, and I was suffering from pretty severe PTSD on top of it at this point. High school felt like a blur for me. G was still in my middle school friend group for a short while after, so I did still have to interact with her. Those times were not pleasant, and she would always try to cause a scene. Eventually though, everyone distanced themselves from her, and I developed a bit of a new friend group within, along with some of my middle school friends. Honestly though, I don't feel I ever got a happy ending. That's the harsh reality of it all. I have to live with what she did to me for the rest of my life. Things that I blocked out for years because it was just too painful to process. I feel as if I'm finally healing now though, and it feels good to share this experience. Children need to be more educated on the topic of sexual abuse. I sadly didn't have that luxury. For a while, I'd wonder who hurt her when she was younger to make her act that way towards me, but quite frankly, I don't care anymore. She deeply hurt me, and she doesn't deserve any sympathy from me. For some context, the situation occurred when I was around 11 years old. I'm 16 years old now, so this was at least 5 years ago now. I live in England, so the school system is a little different to that of America. The school years begin in primary school, from year 1 to year 6, graduating at 10, before beginning secondary at age 11. Now, this was my first year of secondary, being in year 7. I had a small group of friends, consisting of 4 other girls and 1 boy. Now, one of the girls' birthdays were approaching just a few months into the school year. Let's call her Jasmine. Jasmine had lived in a rather large house, with a smaller house across the garden that was rather spacious, with 1 room and a bathroom directly connected to it. She invited me and the other 3 girls to a sleepover at this place. Of course, we had all agreed with enthusiasm, considering that it was our first official sleepover of our preteen years. Arriving around 8 p.m. to her place, we all eagerly set up our blankets, stuffed animals, and such upon the sofa beds in the smaller garden house, as Jasmine then prepared snacks and drinks for our sleepover, along with the movie options on discs for the TV that was hooked up to the wall. It was a very fun night, watching movies and playing silly sleepover games, until it eventually reached midnight, or somewhere about then. And that's when Jasmine had a great idea. You see, I've always been really into horror-based things, ghost stories, legends, etc. So when she suggested we play the age-old game Bloody Mary, I jumped at the idea. The other 3 girls thought it would be a fun idea too, and so we switched on the television and set up the bathroom in accordance with the ritual instructions from Google. Jasmine had gone first, before coming back with nothing, simply giggling and shoving myself in after. Now, despite my enjoyment of horror like this, I also have a pretty severe anxiety disorder. So when the door closed, and I remained alone in the dark, dimly lit bathroom, facing only the mirror, I was petrified something may happen. But I knew that the others had their ears pressed to the door to ensure that I stuck to the game's rules, and I didn't want to disappoint. So of course, I followed the rules and began chanting. Almost as expected, nothing happened, and I left the bathroom with a mix of disappointment and relief. As the other girls continued the game, I sat myself down in my sofa bed, taking my phone from my pajamas. I had been a pretty avid user of a popular app at the time, used for communities and fandoms. But if you ever had experiences with this app at my age, you'd know all too well how dangerous and toxic the environment created by the app was. I was messaging one of my friends in one of the communities, out of boredom, as the game wasn't all that interesting. Well, my friend seemed to go offline abruptly, so considering our similar time zones, I had assumed she was asleep, and I switched off my phone and got comfortable in my place. The girls had finished the game, a good deal disappointed as nothing had happened at all. Turning on the television, another few hours passed with all of us wide awake, giggling, and having forgotten entirely about the game. That was when I received a notification on the app. Now, the app didn't exactly have any security measures that prevented random people that you hadn't friended from DMing you. So when I was messaged by this strange account with an odd-looking profile picture, I sort of passed it off as a bot, which were really notorious on it at the time. I just tapped the chat, expecting to see some weird dating app advertisement. But what I did see was something much, much darker. I can't entirely recall what it wrote, but it was something in strange, distorted text. The letters almost falling out of the text bubble. It was clearly just some glitchy font, possibly to evade spam bans. But the message, it made my blood run cold. It was a chanting message, something almost akin to a cultist message, praising an oddly named being and claiming they were close by to me, behind the door. They repeated this, the message long, as it was praising the strange name and claiming they were coming over and over again. I had sort of anxiously laughed it off, and I showed it to my friend. Let's call her Amy. Amy didn't seem to have the same reaction, being outwardly shocked, showing our other friends. We all no longer found it very funny. We were trying to calm each other down, rationalizing it. Perhaps it was just some edgy fuck trying to creep us out. But then the door creaked and knocked. The door to the smaller house. Now, there weren't exactly any walls on the front of the small house. Instead, however, there were windows, including the door. But we could see nothing but darkness, especially in contrast with the illumination of the television. Another message then came through. We're here. And then it was followed by even more praising to the being. Surely this couldn't have been happening. This couldn't be real. One of them was messing with us, surely. Amy began to sob, and I did too. We decided to risk it all, leaping out of the garden house and running blindly to the back door of the larger one, crying and trembling and sprinting to the living room. We hid out there for a while, leaving the light on as we huddled for about half an hour. I blocked the creep, closed the app and my phone. Nothing else seemed to happen after this. To this day, I'm not entirely sure if it was just some sicko trying to mess with us, or if we really were actually in danger. For some odd reason, we never told anyone though, being the children we were, I guess. Please be careful on social media. Don't ever give away any information that could be personal or put you in danger. And don't trust anyone online that you've never actually met. This happened in May of 2020 when I was 14 years old. My best friend at the time, who we'll call Ella, was spending the night with me. The night was going smoothly, until Ella suggested to me that we go to the nearest Shell station to go get some snacks and slushies. I was hesitant at first, because it was around 11 p.m. at that point, and my area is a hotspot for human trafficking. I pushed my paranoia to the side and agreed to go anyway. The Shell was about a half mile away, so it didn't take us long to get there. We went around the store looking for snacks that we could get, when I saw an older lady standing in the middle of the chip aisle. She wasn't looking at the variety of chips that they had, but she was just staring at me. I walked into the aisle because I wanted a bag of sour cream and onion chips. She was in the way of the chips, so I asked her, "Excuse me, ma'am, but can you scoot over?" She said yes, and then moved so I could get the chips. I met up with Ella so that we could get in line to pay for our stuff. While the guy was scanning our stuff, I turned around and I saw that same woman from earlier. She didn't have anything in her hands, so I thought maybe she was getting cigarettes. Once we paid, we proceeded back to my house. On the way back, we saw this Toyota Camry trailing behind us. When they didn't turn at an intersection, we started to get suspicious. We stopped, and the car next to us also stopped. Ella knocked on the passenger window because she was the closest to the road. The window rolled down, and guess who was in the seat? Yep, the woman from the gas station. Why is she in this car that's been following us? I thought in my head. Once the window rolled all the way down, she then did something completely unexpected. She grabbed Ella's arm and tried to pull her in the car. I immediately grabbed her other arm and got her loose. We ran like hell all the way back to my house as the car sped after us. I'm not a very athletic person, but I was running faster than I ever had before in my life. After about a minute of running, we made it back to my house and ran inside. This was really stupid looking back now. We should have went to one of my neighbors' houses and asked for help. Anyway, we get into the house and lock the door immediately. Surprisingly, she or whoever she was with didn't start banging on the door. We were still so scared then we went into my closet and just stayed in there for the rest of the night. We just stayed awake because we were so scared. Nothing else ended up happening, which I'm also really grateful for. I ended up dropping Ella in October 2021, and I haven't talked to her since, but I know that she was really freaked out as well. I don't go to that gas station anymore unless I'm with my mom and she has to get gas there. I really hate to think what they would have done to us if they had actually managed to kidnap us. It literally makes me sick.